A few people every few hundred years tap into something. Patrice O'Neill was one of those people. And today we will be looking through the Patrice O'Neill Iceberg. The first level is easiest. It is humor. Depending on whom you follow, you might hear them reference a guy named Patrice and they speak highly of him. Or you're listening to something or watching something and you see this guy you've never heard of before who is just hilarious. You find out his name is Patrice O'Neill, you look into him, you find Elephant in the Room, and it's probably the funniest comedy special you've ever watched. Then you look into more things, you find his O&A appearances, maybe you find WebJunk 20, and you watch him, you listen to him, and he's funny. And that's all it is. That is the entire first layer. There are a lot of people who knew Patrice only for his humor, and that's it. They'll think, oh, this guy should have been more famous, but he wasn't. But oh well, and that's it. However, other people listen to him long enough and realize he is preaching about life. It's not just comedy. Comedy is a vehicle Patrice used both to tell you useful information and to conduct field research. Once you notice this, you are in the second layer of the Patrice O'Neill iceberg. What he tells you. Patrice tells you about relationships. What men and women are, not who men and women are. He talks about race. He brings race to a conceptual level, then talks about what those ideas are, what people's positions under those ideas are, and he talks about how those ideas control people. Like how it's ridiculous someone from X country who just got to the United States might identify as white when they have historically, genetically, nothing to do with it. Yet the idea still controls them, and he's stuck dealing with that. He talks about what bothers people and why. Again, context. He points out that there is a context. He works to explore that context, and then he encourages you to unbind yourself from that context. He ensures he has multiple competing viewpoints so everyone can have their say, and then he walks you through either why they're wrong or he contextualizes. Context. He puts things in context so you can understand why people might think what they think, why he thinks what he thinks, and he tries to navigate those ideas. That's the second layer because that's the second layer people most commonly stop. Patrice is real. He talks about real things with logic and honesty, and what he says is final, either to be agreed with or to be dismissed. Now, if you treat Patrice's words, what he tells you, as final and try to implement them into your life, you will probably immediately fail. And you'll be left wondering, well, Patrice succeeded with what he was doing. He was righteous. So why aren't those things working for me? If those are the final good answers, they should work for everybody. But they don't. Yet he succeeded, so there must be something else going on here. That leads us into layer 3. What he doesn't tell you. Now, I say doesn't tell you, but actually, if you're listening closely, he hints at the fact that there are things he isn't telling you, especially if you listen to other people around him. Patrice wasn't square pimping 24/7. He had moments with his quotes wife quotes in which he was a normal dude doing normal dude stuff, having normal dude problems. There are moments he wouldn't follow his own principles. He would exaggerate, omit, or lie to get reactions out of people to see what they were about, and he might not end up telling his listeners that he was lying, leading you to think this is what he actually meant, not that he was doing this to bring something out of someone. He had a gentle side you can pick up on if you listen to him, but you don't get the depths of that gentle and vulnerable side unless you're looking and listening tangentially to other people talking about the times he doesn't have a microphone on. And once you start putting all these things together, you start wondering, why did he do these other things, make these other decisions that seem to be in contrast with the person he purports to be, yet Patrice is so analytical and real, there must be logic to them. What is that logic behind those things he doesn't tell you? One of the biggest things he doesn't tell you, even though he references it a few times, select few times, that I want to mention, even though I am interpreting a dead man's words, which is an entire layer we'll get to, but I want to bring this up here. Even though he says every man or woman is this way, ergo they should act, or you should act this way, he doesn't mean that, because he doesn't do it every single time, and he encourages people not to do those things every single time in other instances. The answer seems to be to figure out what works for you and then do that. That idea has parallels with Alan Watts and any other thinker worth listening to. The packaging will be different, but that message is the same. Now, I bring that up, that independent, individual will, analysis, interpretation, to get us to the fourth layer of the Patrice O'Neill iceberg. The ocean of raw human material he provides you for analysis of the human condition. His O&A appearances alone, there are over 100 of them, around 300 hours of Patrice bullshitting with all sorts of different people. He asks them questions, he probes them, he plays them up, he antagonizes them, all to get choice human reactions out of them for analysis. It's hard to analyze people when they are hiding behind layers of social masks, social scripts, playing safe. You see what people really are when you get them mad, you get them happy, you get any sort of emotion that overcomes that social programming and gets them acting like animals. Especially if you get them firing on multiple conflicting emotions at the same time. And Patrice sometimes analyzes those things, but other times he can't. Either because of the situation, the context, or because of a frustrating lack of established language, vernacular, lexicon, whatever you want to call it. It's hard to articulate things that humans have been culturally programmed to hide, to ignore, or to run out with torches and pitchforks. He's trying to build a vocabulary to analyze the things that are happening. And one of my favorite things he said was, look, I'm trying to get to the first steps to the idea of building a system. Would you just help me do that instead of trying to shoot me down? Because there is a system that could be established. There are lessons you can pull out of those moments, but people don't want to let that happen. And as hard as he tries, he can't analyze everything for you right there on the spot. The fourth layer is you're taking the material, all the experiences, all the emotions, all the thoughts he drags out of people, and building some kind of vocabulary, using some kind of system to analyze those moments and turn them into something useful. Patrice was already doing it. Couldn't do it all the time. Now it's your job. We are pushing into the fifth layer, but while we're still on the fourth layer, let me say this is why the Myers-Briggs and the cognitive functions are so useful. We will preface the fifth layer with that and something else. I am an English major, and it's a strange degree. When I went into it, I thought I would be learning a little bit about books and how to say the curtains are blue, and the curtains are blue mean sadness, and I would use the degree to prove that I knew how to write, even though I thought the degree itself would be worthless, just so I could get a job and have papers saying I know what I know. Now, the curtains are blue by itself is worthless, and English as a degree seems aware of that. English isn't the curtains are blue and that means sadness. It becomes the curtains are blue and that means people are mentally vulnerable to this concept, and if we use this concept, we can manipulate them into not only doing this thing that will hurt them, but get them so deep in the lie they will fight for the right to hurt themselves. I thought I'm gonna get an English degree and learn a little bit about books, and my professors grabbed me and told me, no, you're not gonna learn about books. You're going to learn that you are a puppet, that you are on strings, and you will learn to analyze the strings you're dancing on and teach you how better to dance on those strings, because you'll never get away from those strings, but you will learn about them, and your learning will benefit you because you won't fall for the banana in the tailpipe. Patrice O'Neill was a theorist. How can I take this raw human material and develop a system I can sharpen it against and use it to accomplish something? If you look behind any major social or political movement, if you look behind any human being within a culture, you will see not them as an individual, but the theory that is controlling them. A theory is a crafted and enforced or programmed or embraced perspective that teaches people to view a certain set of things a certain way. And 99.9% of the time, they aren't going to realize that's happening. That's why Patrice's discussions, especially the contentious ones, are so important. He brings out the lens people have internalized. And he seems like he is trying to figure out, one, how to communicate this to people, because again, most people aren't going to realize this is happening, and unless you have a certain background, there isn't exactly a vocabulary to explain these things. And two, he's trying to figure out how to escape it himself and create new options. That's what options are, I think, when he says them. You have other options aside from what you have been programmed culturally to think. Aside from what your lens that you don't even realize you're seeing the world through says you're allowed to do. Again, that's why his discussions, all this raw material he's provided, is so important. He brings those lenses to the surface and allows you to test your systems on them, to experiment with options. That's why I like MBTI and cognitive functions. It gives you a vocabulary to articulate the strings you're on and try, if not to get out of them, then at least to be aware of them and not get pigeonholed into one thing, which is what everyone in the world is trying to do to you. And worst, you'll do to yourself if you aren't careful. That was my entire childhood. Now, this all brings us into layer 5, the deepest layer I'm aware of at the moment. What does Patrice O'Neill mean as an archetype? What information, lessons, and directions can we mine, extract from him as someone who taps into something about human nature? Patrice's life is a tragedy. So tragic, in fact, I don't know about you, but I will listen to some of his appearances, some of his interviews that are a certain way, and I'll feel weird and bad the next couple days. I don't feel that about other people. I don't get that way listening to almost anything else. There is some reason Patrice and his life affect people to that degree. How can you feel this way listening to someone you've never met? Someone who is relatively not even successful. Well, tragedies are meant to teach you lessons, and I think this tragedy goes beyond the typical Greek dumb shit of trying to teach you lessons using character flaws. This tragedy has lessons which require systems and analysis to pull out. What does it mean that Patrice didn't have a father? I'll link the Mark Maron interview in the description. I think it's one of his best interviews. And Patrice tries to articulate what it means, but he seems unsatisfied with his own analysis because it doesn't entirely hit the mark. It's beginning to, but it's not everything. Patrice never talks about, or rarely talks about, indirectly talks about Colin Quinn's relationship to him as a sort of mentor or father figure. And I'll link another thing in the description. It's a Joe Rogan clip talking about the idea of the second father and what that is supposed to mean. That seems like a concept you could apply to what Patrice talks about and what other people mention, people in his life, to turn it, one, into an explanation of what's going on, and two, into a direction you as a person facing similar circumstances can take. But even that is just one theory. That's what theory is. It is trying to build options for people to think, then take action on. James Joyce wrote Ulysses. It is the quintessential modernist text. Most theories trying to get off the ground cut their teeth on Ulysses first. There is so much criticism in and about Ulysses, generating options for people to think. Theory is actionable interpretation. And if you trace all modern thought back to a source, you will see the source isn't exactly anything in and of itself. People aren't following sources directly. They are following theories generated from those sources. Actionable interpretation. And good theories are founded on sources connected to something about the human experience. Something you read, and even without necessarily any preconceived notions, any theories you're aware of, because you will have theory already controlling you, but you go into it without a schema, without a theory, and you read it, and you develop your own theory as you're reading it. That means it is a fertile source. You can develop actionable interpretation using it without needing tons of scaffolding or context. If you're following, Patrice is a damn fertile source. It's like when he watched Fight Club. Something happened. I don't know what, but it was absolutely something white. Patrice's life and his teachings are a good, fertile source that, without any interpretation, will make you feel something. Whether that's agreement, anger, whatever, you will feel something, and you will interpret something from it. Meaning it is a good source to apply logic and systems to get something actionable out of it. What does it mean Patrice never felt safe in his own mind again after his experience with how crooked the justice system is? What does it mean his friend went clinically insane after it? What do his feelings about it mean? Maybe you have similar experiences that are breaking you down inside. Patrice managed to survive it and maintain a semblance of mental integrity. There's probably a tool you can gain from that if you analyze it and figure out what that tool is, or turn it into a tool. What does it mean Patrice and Opie seemed to be genuine friends? Everybody hates Opie. Patrice didn't. In fact, he seemed to like Opie quite a lot. And it's something Patrice never explained. What does that mean? Does the fact almost everyone in Patrice's life turned into maggots, eating his corpse for sustenance years after he died. And Opie was one of the only people who seemed to call anyone out on it. What does it mean Patrice had a distinct change in dress and sociability around 2008-2009? He talks about it a little bit, but not really, and he did it knowing there would be pressure for him not to, yet he still did it. And he never exactly went into detail about why. What does that change mean? And what can we learn from that and use about it? The final layer of the Patrice O'Neal iceberg is realizing the man hit on something absolutely human. And the same way he would use anything human to learn and build systems to help him survive, he provides and becomes the perfect foundation for new theories to come out of, because even if you aren't consciously theorizing over his life, you will be doing it unconsciously in your reaction to him at all. And if you make it conscious, if you use logic, you use analysis, you use all sorts of different systems to develop theories that will fail, others will succeed, and now we have new, proven, effective options for living beyond what we are programmed to think. Programmed to think there are no other options. There are, and Patrice and his life are the tools, the sources by which we can create those options. That's the fifth layer. He's one of the most important people, or he was one of the most important people in our lifetime, because he wasn't bullshitting. He was funny and approachable. His systems were effective even if you didn't want to theorize on your own. He would criticize himself and recommend people not to do everything he says, unlike most people, most bullshitters people seem to rally behind nowadays. And ultimately, unfortunately, he died. Or rather, the author now is dead. What's there is there, and that's all that's there. And the living author's viewpoint can't influence theory. Patrice is one of the most important voices in my life, and we can keep him alive by using his theories, his material, the material he brought out of people, and his life as a foundation by which to analyze our way into, hopefully, better lives. Even though my saying this and my way of saying it at all is some kind of criticizable thing. But that about rippity wraps this one up. I hope you enjoyed watching, because I certainly enjoyed making it. I am feeling some kind of way today. I listened to that Mark Maron interview with Patrice, and it just put me in a weird mood. Like if you enjoyed, because it helps me out a lot. Subscribe if you haven't, because we do this shit sometimes, and comment your thoughts, because I love hearing from you. The way he talked about realizing all these things about his life a few months before he dies. And that if he doesn't make it, other people in his life, he won't be able to elevate them. And even if he does succeed, even if he can elevate them, he can elevate them only financially, not these other familial or relationship-y ways. It bugged me. And just the way so many people acted and continue to act after he died and revealed they could have acted while he was alive but didn't stinks. And if those people are in bad places now, fuck them, because they deserve it. But thanks again for watching, everybody. Really, we have a lot of fun on this channel. So much fun, in fact, you can want to fill your stomach with it, because fun is nourishing, and you're starving for some fun right now. You're just hankering for it. And some fun is what you need. It'll fill your belly and it'll fill your soul. That's how much fun we have on this channel, and I look forward to doing this with you guys again in the future.